My name is Mia Marta. I am 28 years old, and last Sunday in Dallas, Texas, my family destroyed our relationship forever. For years, my brother was handled like fragile royalty, while I was treated as the unpaid family servant, physically exhausted from managing every chore. When he had a minor elective surgery, my parents immediately demanded I become his full-time nurse. I refused, so during our Sunday church gathering, my mother grabbed the microphone and publicly shamed me as a selfish, heartless daughter in front of the congregation. I didn't cry or scream. I calmly walked up to the altar, handed the pastor my own surgical discharge papers, proving I was recovering from a major organ removal my parents ignored, and walked out the chapel doors. Before I tell you what the pastor read aloud that made my parents freeze, hit like, tell me your age in the comments, and welcome back to my channel. I work as a supply chain analyst. My job is to locate bottlenecks, track missing inventory, and fix systems that fail. It is a profession built on cold numbers and measurable outcomes. Somewhere along the line, I started applying that same logic to my family. My brother Julian is 26. He sells commercial real estate, or at least he holds a license to sell it. He drives a leased vehicle he cannot afford and wears custom suits he buys on credit. In my parents' eyes, Julian is a sports car. They view him as a high-yield investment, their golden ticket to a comfortable retirement once he lands a mythical 7-figure deal. I am the utility vehicle. I am the one they call when the sports car gets a flat tire. 3 weeks ago, Julian tore his meniscus playing paddleball with a potential client. It required a minor outpatient scope. Nothing life-threatening. In my mother's house, a scratch on Julian is treated like a state emergency. My phone rang on a Tuesday during a quarterly forecasting meeting. I stepped into the hallway to answer. My mother did not say hello. She told me Julian needed the surgery on Friday, so he could recover in time for a networking conference in Austin. The problem was his insurance deductible. He did not have the cash. My parents did not have the cash. She asked me to co-sign a medical credit line. I knew it was a terrible financial decision. I process risk for a living. Putting my name on thousands of dollars of my brother's debt was a vulnerability I could not justify on paper. But I am an enabler. I have spent a decade buying my family's approval by fixing their logistical failures. Saying no meant dealing with a dozen passive-aggressive texts, guilt trips about family duty, and my father's heavy sighs at Sunday dinner. Saying yes bought me peace. So I signed the digital forms on my phone in the office hallway, linking my immaculate credit to Julian's knee. I ignored the sharp pull in my own abdomen when I pressed send. I had been feeling it for days. A deep, radiating heat under my right rib cage. I blamed it on stress and bad coffee. Whenever the pain spiked, I swallowed 2 ibuprofen and went back to organizing Julian's post-op transport. I coordinated his ride from the clinic. I ordered the specific gel ice packs my mother requested. I tracked the delivery to his apartment. I prioritized his schedule over my own physical reality. I resented them for treating me like a concierge service, but I never set the boundary. My resentment was silent, which meant it was entirely my fault. On Thursday evening, I was standing in my kitchen reviewing a vendor contract. My phone buzzed with a text from Julian asking me to pick up his prescription pain medicine before his Friday morning procedure. I reached for my keys. I never made it to the door. The pain did not ramp up. It struck with the force of a hammer. My knees hit the hardwood floor. The air left my lungs. I tried to stand, and my vision narrowed to a gray tunnel. I pressed my forehead against the cool floorboards, gripping the edge of the kitchen island, waiting for the wave to pass. It did not pass. It sharpened. My phone buzzed again on the counter above me. It was my mother checking if I had secured the medication. I could hear the vibration rattling against the granite. I pulled myself toward the living room rug, reached for my smartwatch, and tapped the emergency dial. The dispatcher answered. I managed to whisper my address, and 2 words before the pain forced my eyes shut. I need help. The siren wailed through the Dallas rain, cutting through the humid evening air. Water struck the metal roof of the ambulance in heavy, uneven patterns. I lay strapped to the stretcher, listening to the steady mechanical beep of the heart monitor and the synthetic crinkle of the paramedics adjusting my oxygen mask. They wheeled me through the sliding doors of the emergency wing under blinding fluorescent lights. The surgical team moved with efficient urgency. The surgeon informed me the gallbladder was severely infected and on the verge of rupturing, requiring immediate extraction and a prolonged course of intravenous antibiotics. The anesthesiologist counted backward, and the cold medication pulled me under before I could even process the vendor contracts still sitting on my kitchen island. I woke up hours later to the rhythmic low hum of the hospital ventilation system. A dull, heavy ache wrapped around my midsection. 4 separate incisions marked my abdomen tight and burning with every breath. I reached for my phone resting on the plastic tray table beside the bed. The screen illuminated the dim recovery room. The notification banner showed 3 new messages from my mother. I opened the thread expecting panic, or at least a question about my whereabouts. There was no panic. None of the messages asked where I was. None of them asked why I had failed to drop off the prescription. The texts only expressed deep irritation that the pharmacy might lock its doors before I finished my supposed errands. That is the precise moment I made a flawed decision. A rational person would have called their family and explained the emergency surgery. I chose silence. I locked my phone and set it face down on the tray table. I lay rigid in the sterile hospital bed, listening to the steady drip of my 4 fluid. I watched the hallway lights flicker through the window blinds, waiting for the device to vibrate. I wanted to see if anyone would realize the utility vehicle was missing before they needed a ride. I stared at the dark screen until my eyes burned. I listened to my own shallow breathing and the distant synthetic chime of an elevator arriving down the hall. I let them figure it out on their own. My calculation was wrong. They did not notice I was missing. They only noticed the absence of my service. I spent the next 3 days recovering alone in a sterile room smelling of iodine and bleached cotton. The financial reality of the procedure hit me before the physical pain subsided. I logged into my banking application using the unsecured hospital network. My high-deductible health insurance plan left me responsible for a staggering portion of the surgical costs. I initiated transfers from my primary savings account to cover the initial billing deposits. The numbers on the screen shrank. The financial safety net I had spent 3 years meticulously building dissolved in a matter of keystrokes. Emails from my supply chain firm piled up in my inbox. My manager requested urgent timeline updates on the delayed logistics contracts. The stress compounded the physical ache in my side. I was a professional trained to track missing inventory and resolve systemic failures, but nobody was tracking me. I managed my own discharge on Sunday morning. I ordered a private car service and walked to the curb feeling the fresh stitches pull tight against my skin with every step. The driver kept the radio off. The tires hummed over the wet asphalt all the way to my building. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, taking deliberate shallow breaths. I locked the front door and sat on my sofa surrounded by absolute quiet. A full week passed. I managed my recovery with ice packs, heating pads, and careful measured movements. I worked from my laptop on the couch, returning emails and untangling supply chain bottlenecks while nursing a body that felt hollowed out. Julian underwent his knee scope on Friday. The family dynamic continued operating without my participation. Then my phone vibrated against the glass coffee table. The buzzing sound echoed in the silent living room. I picked it up. My mother had sent a text containing a detailed, rigid itinerary. The schedule outlined my required nursing duties for Julian. Monday morning transport to the physical therapy clinic. Tuesday afternoon meal preparation, including his preferred protein shakes. Wednesday morning medication management and fresh bandages. She formatted the text like a corporate directive, expecting automatic compliance. I sat on the sofa, holding a warm pad against my stitched abdomen. I typed my response using careful neutral terms. I stated that due to medical reasons, I was unavailable to provide care for Julian. I hit send. The reply arrived less than a minute later. The phone vibrated again. My mother did not ask what my medical reasons were. She did not ask if I was unwell. She sent a dense paragraph accusing me of inventing excuses. She claimed I was holding a bitter grudge because Julian received attention for his paddleball injury. She typed that family duty required personal sacrifice and that my stubborn behavior was jeopardizing his crucial recovery window for the upcoming Austin real estate networking event. She stated that Julian needed a supportive sister, not a spiteful rival. I read the words while a sharp cramp radiated through my stomach. The irony was entirely physical. I was recovering from the sudden removal of a major organ, and my mother believed I was faking illness out of spite over a minor outpatient knee scope. I did not reply. The phone vibrated 3 more times in rapid succession. I muted the device and set it aside. The screen lit up silently in the dim room, reflecting my mother continuing to text her grievances into the empty space. The hospital bills arrived in the mail 2 days later. The thick paper envelopes dropped through the mail slot with a soft thud. I opened them on the kitchen island. The out-of-pocket maximums were confusing and contradictory. Certain anesthesia charges processed out of network. The financial drain was unsustainable. I needed time to audit the invoices before the hospital initiated automated withdrawals from my compromised accounts. I booted up my laptop. The keys clicked under my fingers as I navigated to the medical credit provider's portal. I accessed the security dashboard and initiated a temporary account lock. It is a standard protective measure an analyst takes to prevent automated balance increases or unauthorized charges while auditing massive personal expenses. The confirmation email pinged in my inbox. The lock secured the account, shielding me from immediate liabilities. I made a critical oversight. I process complex supply chain data daily, but I failed to track Julian's billing schedule. The luxury outpatient center had not yet charged his initial deposit. Locking the portal halted any incoming transaction authorizations on that specific medical line. I did not know it at the time. I simply closed my laptop and listened to the rain starting to strike the apartment windows. The guilt arrived that evening. It always does. Decades of conditioning do not disappear because you mute a phone. I had been trained since childhood to fix the family bottlenecks. I imagined Julian sitting in his apartment needing fresh ice packs. I imagined my mother sighing in frustration, blaming me for his discomfort. The internal resistance pushed me toward the hallway. I reached for my car keys, resting on the entry table. I grabbed my heavy wool coat. I slipped my right arm into the sleeve and twisted my torso to pull the fabric over my left shoulder. The twisting movement stretched my abdominal wall. The internal stitches pulled tight. A sudden blinding pain shot through my core, dropping me to my knees. I dropped the coat, leaned against the drywall, letting out a sharp, ragged gasp. The sound of my own strained breathing filled the narrow hallway. The physical limit overrode the mental conditioning. My body refused to play the dutiful servant. I could not drive a car. I could not carry ice packs. I could not pretend I was unbroken. I left the coat on the floor. I walked back to the sofa, clutching my side. The apartment settled around me. I turned off a lamp and sat in the dark. The wind rattled the window panes. I allowed the silence to hold the space I used to fill with apologies. The quiet was heavy and expensive, but I decided to pay the price. Sunday morning arrived with the stifling humidity typical of Dallas. I had no business leaving my apartment. My surgeon had given explicit instructions to avoid driving and to limit my physical exertion to slow, deliberate walks across my living room rug. I chose to ignore the medical advice. I dressed in a simple, loose navy garment that did not press tightly against my swollen abdomen. I picked up my car keys, along with a heavy brass spare key to my parents' house. My intention was to hand that spare key directly to my mother. I wanted to formally resign from my uncompensated role as Julian's personal medical concierge and return to the safety of my sofa. I drove toward the suburban megachurch our family had attended since my childhood. The church campus spans 50 acres. It features a coffee shop, 3 overflow parking structures, and a main sanctuary designed to seat 4,000 people. For my mother, this building is not a place of quiet reflection. It functions as her primary stage. Reputation is the main currency exchanged in those carpeted aisles. She serves on the hospitality board and coordinates the seasonal charity drives. Her identity relies heavily on projecting an image of a flawless, devoted family. I parked my vehicle near the back edge of the lot. Getting out of the driver's seat required a slow, calculated rotation of my hips. Fire flared along my stitch line, forcing me to stop and breathe. I pressed my hand flat against my side and walked toward the tall glass entrance doors. The worship band was finishing their opening music set when I slipped into the sanctuary. I found an empty seat in the very last row. The plush fabric of the pew offered zero physical support. Sitting down forced my core muscles to engage, sending a fresh wave of nausea through my chest. I focused on taking shallow, controlled breaths. I scanned the massive room and located my family in their usual premium spot near the center aisle. Julian sat beside my mother, wearing a bulky brace over his trousers. Several church members hovered nearby, offering sympathetic pats on his shoulder. Julian nodded, bravely playing his assigned role of the stoic, recovering patient. My mother smiled gracefully, absorbing the second-hand attention like a sponge. I planned to wait until the service concluded to hand over the key. The service transitioned to the morning announcements. As a senior member of the hospitality board, my mother was scheduled to address the congregation. She smoothed her skirt and walked to the microphone positioned near the altar steps to discuss the upcoming seasonal charity drive. The massive congregation quieted down. She finished the schedule and then she paused. She looked perfectly serene. She gripped the microphone stand and thanked the community for their prayers regarding Julian's recent surgery. She spoke about his bright future in commercial real estate and the tragic timing of his sports injury. Then she paused. She let a heavy, sorrowful silence settle over the thousands of people watching her. She looked out into the crowd, and her eyes tracked directly to the back row where I was sitting. She asked the congregation to pray for her daughter. She used a tone dripping with polite concern. She stated that times of family crisis require a servant spirit. She explained that Julian needed vital care, and that I had chosen to turn my back on my own brother. She told the room that financial success in the corporate world must have given me a hardened heart. She asked everyone to pray that I would find my way back to humility and remember the importance of family duty. The public execution was masterful. She did not yell. She did not hurl insults. She used calculated religious terminology to paint me as a selfish career woman abandoning her injured sibling. Heads began to turn. Hundreds of faces shifted to look at the back row. The people I had known since Sunday school stared at me with varying degrees of pity and judgment. I sat in the pew and felt the familiar pressure to shrink. The old version of me would have run out the back doors in tears to hide. The old version would have called her later begging for forgiveness to avoid the social isolation. I felt the pulse of my own heartbeat in my throat. I looked at my mother, standing at the microphone, basking in her manufactured martyrdom. I did not feel humiliated. I felt a cold clarity. I reached into my leather tote bag. I had brought a manila folder containing my medical documentation, intended for my human resources department. It also contained a letter I had received in Saturday's mail. It was a printed notification from the medical credit provider. The temporary security lock I placed on the medical account had functioned exactly as designed. The notice stated that recent authorization attempts by a luxury outpatient rehabilitation center had been declined due to the freeze. The line of credit was locked. Julian's premium recovery care had defaulted. I stood up. The physical effort required to lift myself from the pew tore a gasp from my lips. I swallowed it. I stepped into the center aisle. The sanctuary was silent. 4,000 people watched me walk. Every step was an exercise in agony. The muscles in my abdomen screamed in protest. I kept my posture straight. I kept my face blank. I did not look at the whispers erupting in the pews. I walked the length of the long aisle, focusing only on the polished wood of the altar. My mother's serene expression faltered as I approached. She gripped the microphone tighter. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I walked past them without a single glance. I approached Pastor Davis, who stood near the pulpit, holding his Bible, looking uncertain about how to mediate the unfolding tension. I handed him the manila folder. He took it hesitantly. I leaned forward. The movement sent a sharp stabbing pain through my liver bed. I ignored it. I spoke quietly, ensuring my voice only reached the pastor. I told him to read the surgical discharge papers on the left. I told him to read the dates on the credit decline notice on the right. I suggested he read them out loud before my mother asked for any more prayers. I placed my mother's brass house key on top of the closed folder. The metal clinked softly against the heavy paper. I turned around. I did not wait for the pastor to open the file. I did not wait for the realization to dawn on his face. I faced the long aisle leading back to the exit. Walking away was the most difficult physical task I have ever performed. My body trembled with the effort of remaining upright. The incisions burned like hot wires under my dress. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. I was permanently severing ties with the community that had shaped my childhood. I was burning the bridge to my parents and my brother. The cost of this boundary was steep and undeniable. I felt the weight of that loss pressing down on my shoulders as I pushed through the heavy wooden doors. The bright Dallas sunlight hit my face. The heat enveloped me instantly. I walked toward my car, leaving the silent sanctuary behind me to wait for the fallout. I sat in the driver's seat with both hands gripping the steering wheel. The leather felt slick under my damp palms. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the Texas sky, vibrating through the floorboards of the vehicle. Heavy rain began to strike the windshield in a steady rhythmic pattern. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes. The adrenaline of the confrontation evaporated, leaving a brutal searing heat across my abdomen. It felt like jagged glass, grinding inside my stomach with every heartbeat. I did not feel a sense of triumph. I felt a profound, heavy grief settling deep inside my chest. Hot tears slipped down my cheeks. I pressed a trembling hand over my fresh stitches, curling forward as a physical sob ripped through my throat, tearing at the surgical glue. The sound of my own ragged crying filled the enclosed space, mingling with the downpour outside. I turned the ignition key. The engine roared to life. I drove away from the massive parking lot, leaving the only community I had ever known behind me. I received only the heavy envelopes containing my own medical debt. The financial burden of my emergency surgery was solely my responsibility. This was the true cost of setting a boundary. I navigated the logistics of my life without a safety net, carrying the grief of losing a family I never truly possessed. The morning was a physical weight, matching the dull ache of my healing incisions. I systematically severed the remaining ties. I canceled every automated payment, blocked their numbers, and severed the shared cellular plan. The endless stream of notifications stopped. The silence in my apartment shifted from a heavy, oppressive quiet into a neutral space. As my physical scars faded into thin white lines, my emotional clarity sharpened. I had spent 28 years managing the burdens of people who viewed my existence as a convenience. I finally understood the arithmetic of my own life. I stopped paying for a seat at a table where I was only ever allowed to serve.